I'll open up for any questions, and I'll defer if I need to, but I'll try to answer them myself.
What happened with it? Stolen license plate?
Hold on one second.
If this was so important, this is going to help you guys as this great tool to solve crime, why not bring it to the city council for approval? They could have an ordinance where they lay out how it's going to be regulated. We saw with the speed cameras, the legislature had to come back and change the rules after they were implemented. Why not go through that legislative process?
Sure. So, we looked at models across the country and see how they're implemented. Look, and I know there's some interest in controlling body-worn camera legislatively, but this is fluid as well. As we entered into body-worn cameras, as we entered, speed cameras is a little bit different, and even red light camera, the state has the authority and needs to grant the authority legislatively, and so we went through that process as well. I understand your point. This is going to be fluid, and we're hoping that the public understands the purpose and focus of this program, solving crimes, that we don't need legislative, there's legislative oversight, but we don't need legislation dictating about how we can use this kind of technology.
And why not have any public hearings? I know you had allowed the public to comment via email. Why not have any public hearings about this, again, like we do with, frankly, when a lot of new programs are launched?
Sure, we can have a public hearing. We want to get the first step and get this implemented because we're going to be working out some of the bugs. We know that there's going to be a lot of information here, and we're going to prioritize in crime, violent crime first and foremost. That's what's driving here, and that's what we're going to focus on. If it expands, we're willing to do a public hearing in the future to hear some feedback, but technologies here we've seen in other jurisdictions. The execution of this technology very successfully for crime deterrence and crime prevention, and also solving crime when it does happen. Yes,
Now,
Amy, after you.
Yeah. Criminals are stolen license plate and they're using it. When you do the investigation, how are we going to make sure that no innocent person with a stolen license plate get in trouble?
Yeah, so that's addressed in the policy. So understand, this is a lead. So this technology is a lead to get you to. And so there is some instances even in our federal, database that a stolen car wasn't taken out of the system. We, as law enforcement now for many years, need to verify that car is still stolen. So in the instance where we have a unregistered plate used in that crime, look, we're not going to those people that we know that's unregistered and we don't know if those are the suspects. That's where the detectives will come in and just not jump to the person that had their plate stolen and it came up on a crime and we're taking action. There's protocols. Before we do that, we need to verify several things before we approach that person that may innocently have had his registration or her registration stolen. Amy?
Commissioner, you mentioned last week that there were only like 40 to 50 replies in
Yes.
terms of public comment.
Yes.
Is that really enough for this type of technology? And also regarding the public hearing stuff asked about, why not have that beforehand? You seem willing to have one.
Sure. So we had about 65. We gave it 14 days, maybe 10, for public input, and we announced it. We invite the public. My perspective is we heard from people that have concerns. We have addressed as many of those concerns. Some, first of all, just don't want it and said, no, you shouldn't be deploying this technology, where others had some legitimate concerns in which we addressed in our policy. I'm not dodging your question about the public hearing. We're looking to move this forward because if we run into some unforeseen issues that we need some public input, we're always willing to take public input all the time, and we do. We don't need to have a town hall or a public hearing. We're always taking public input. But I understand your point, and we're willing, if there's great concern about how this technology is being used, that we'll do a public hearing.
And I'll just
Yeah.
Amy, part of it is also, it's we're integrating technology and adopting new policies on an ongoing, regular basis. And I don't think there's any principled way to distinguish which ones require full-on public hearings versus which ones that don't. We try to navigate that balance as best we can by being transparent and letting folks know in advance that we're pursuing this technology, that we're adopting a policy, that we're asking for input. When you compare the process that we've gone through with this, I think it far outstrips what you've seen in other circumstances. And so there's just no principled way to say, well, these kinds have to slow down and go through a whole process, and which ones don't. So that's part of the calculus, and us trying to navigate all of those competing interests as best we can.
And just one more question. Is it true that the cameras can also make use of images from things like Ring doorbell cameras or other surveillance technology?
What was your question?
Can the cameras make any sort of use of things from Ring doorbell cameras or other surveillance technology? Can those images?
I mean, I'm sure Josh is biting to get up here and say no, but
Well, that's been a concern from some of the folks protesting outside, and I don't know if that's true or not, so.
Yeah, do you mind if I?
yeah, no, jump in.
That is not true.
Okay.
That's good.
While we have
Yeah.
Mr. Thomas, so that your contract with the city says that Flock may share data with third parties, either if they're compelled to by a law enforcement agency or if they deem it necessary for public safety. I think the chief said Flock would not be sharing data. Can you just clarify what data do you share and with whom?
Yeah, so it's under subpoenas, or if there's other reasons that we would have to legally share that information. But the colonel was right. The city of Providence will own all of this data, and they have the final authority on all of that.
And would you share data with immigration authorities?
We do not have any sort of relationship with immigration authorities, no.
Okay, you've never shared with immigration.
Correct. But if a law enforcement agency is legally required to do that in other states, they may do that, but Flock Safety has never done that.
25 cameras, do
Sorry.
we have a
Yeah.
public list of where they are and how did you choose where they would go up?
So we are not sharing with immigration. Let it be clear, it's in the policy. We will share with other law enforcement entities on a criminal investigation basis. That's it. No administrative, no civil, only for criminal investigations. So we're eventually going to get to 25. Obviously, we're both consulting and looking at our, where's the crimes occurring? Violent crime and all the other crimes. And we push that out to you all on a regular basis. So we call it a heat map. Where's the center of our crime? And where that center is, and it's not just concentrated in one area of the city, it's pockets. That's where those cameras are going to go, and that's where they'll be deployed for the 25. Will they change and subject to change? Possibly, but it's driven by where crime is being committed, so we can deter and prevent and investigate and hold those criminals responsible. Best practice across the country is not to identify what location at what intersection or what pole for obvious reasons. They'll end up getting vandalized, and it destroys our ability to continue with this process. So generally, we'll let you know where those cameras are, but you can look at a heat map and see for yourself where those crimes are being committed, and I'll tell you that's where those cameras will ultimately be.
Just to be clear, they're up now.
Hold on one second. Yes.
This is a year-long pilot program. What are you going to use to determine whether or not you want this to become permanent?
Success. Success in driving crime down, success with apprehension and holding criminals accountable, like we've seen in Cranston. So it's going to take us a little bit of time, but once we see and we're convinced we're going to see success, and we're going to report that to the public, that's going to make this successful.
I have this as kind of
Let me just answer a little bit. So to explain a little bit more about the technology, the cameras aren't necessarily meant to catch crime, as it's happening. 25 cameras just isn't going to do that. The city's too big. But the technology, what it does is, if we have a lead on the license plate, it pings you that it's been sort of read by a camera in this location. and then 2 minutes later was pinged by a camera in this location, it allows law enforcement to hone in on where that car is, where the folks are. And correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner, but I believe we've already had cases where we've had a lead on a license plate, and that gets entered into the system, and a ping has come back from another state that has the technology, which allows us to know where that person, where that car is, and ultimately make our arrest. Is that correct? Yeah.
So this is
We're
kind of
gonna
extreme.
time for one more.
This is what I'm envisioning. What if, you know, the people that are against it, it's probably illegal, but what if they start driving around with their license plates covered up?
It is illegal, and you're required to have the vehicle that you're driving registered, and I'm sure there'll be some thoughts about how do you defeat this, just like any other device, right? But we've had cameras reading license plates. We just don't see that happening in other cities to defeat the system.
Is there a date that the cameras are being turned on?
It's fluid. We expect within 30 days. We got some permitting and we got training to do as well. But we expect within 30 days we'll be up and running with the 25 cameras.
Alexa here, and then we got to wrap.
It's my understanding that Cranston Police Department is automatically sharing some of their data with specific police departments. Is that the case in here as well?
That will be the case here as well,
But
yes.
which ones?
I'm confused with your question.
Which departments or agencies are you sharing this data automatically?
So we're going to share it with those departments that have block. Cranston does, Woonsocket does, and there are some other municipalities on the West Bay that does. It's a law enforcement tool, and we'll share with our regional law enforcement folks. Cranston has shared their data with us. It solved a couple crimes here in Providence that they have it. We know the power, and if it's a legitimate criminal investigation by another law enforcement agency in this region, we'll share.
Right here, Dash.
And so one of the concerns from people and some of the protesters outside is invasion of privacy. As these cameras are pinging license plates, for regular persons just driving by, where is their plate being stored, and just where is that all that data going to be stored, and how may it be used in the future?
I'm not the IT guy, but in the cloud, and it's stored, by our vendor, and it's owned by the Providence Police. So, there's security measures so somebody can't hack into the data in the cloud, and that's important as well, but that's where it's stored. If we need to access it, that's where we're gonna go, and it's all documented. If Parry's gonna access the system, there's an audit trail, the reason why, and what he looked at. And so that applies to the 440 police officers that we have. There's a strong audit trail because we want to make sure we're accountable in how it's used, and that we share it just like Cranston and other municipalities to the public on our portal as well. So it'll be live updates, the number of license plates being captured, the number of hot lists, the number of police officers accessing that. This is all data that's going to be provided to the public.
How often will you audit how the officers are using the database?
Say it again?
How often will you audit how
I mean,
police officers are accessing?
Look, this is going to be slow at first because everyone isn't going to have access. But at the beginning, we're going to be monitoring this very closely. We're going to do a monthly audit. We're not going to wait a month to do it. We're going to see how this runs, but we're going to do a monthly, and then from there, if there's, we'll rely on Flock to help us, and if there's a repeated, a particular officer, we're going to know pretty quickly. But the audit is going to be continuous, and then probably every month, just to be sure that we're auditing and reporting that audit.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone.